My name is Shawntay. I am the Chief Trainologist and founder of the Instructional Design Company, this Hangout group, and the Instructional Design and Tech Accelerator Certificate Program. Prior to becoming an instructional designer and an e-learning developer, I was a classroom teacher in Greenville, Texas. I taught 5th grade social studies and science and 6th grade science. And then life happened and I decided to make the transition. At the time, I didn't even know what instructional design was. I was really just looking for jobs that had some crossover skills. And I got lucky and I found an opportunity that wasn't too far away, which was really kind of a Jack or a Jill of all trades kind of job. It was a the training facilitator, the training developer, the LMS administrator, the e-learning developer, the training marketing person. It was all of those things. So I made that transition and I haven't looked back, and I'm absolutely loving instructional design and e-learning development, and the kind of life that I can live with doing that, because I am 100% remote and I love that. Katie, how about you? Let's hear your story.
Yes, my name is Katie, and I was a former high school and middle school teacher in Oklahoma. I taught for 10 years, and near the end of that, I was around year 8, and I was looking to do something else. I was moonlighting as a waitress in my part-time, as most teachers are currently, and I just thought, I got to do something else, and I don't want to be a coach, and I don't want to be a school counselor, and I don't want to be a school principal. So what are my options? And I decided to go back to school, and I found instructional design that no one knew what that was. And I had to explain it to everyone that asks. And I have loved it. And I found Shawntay as my first instructional design boss. And so today is bringing back a lot of memories, because this interview thing is something that is how we started, Shawntay and I. So in an interview. So I'm excited to get into that today.
So today we're going to talk about what you should expect in an instructional design interview. And in that, there are definitely some things that you need to be thinking about, right? So the good news is that if you have landed an interview, you've done something very right with your resume and your cover letter. Yep. So you set that resume up in such a way that it passed the applicant tracking system, or it gained the interest of a hiring manager. So very good. If you've made it that far, you're doing really, really good. And then interviews, you don't always get the first job that you interview for. Sometimes you have to interview for several before you ultimately end up landing that job. But what Katie and I want to do today is just kind of talk you through some things that you can expect, some things that you should expect during the interview, some things that you could do to prepare to put your best foot forward during that process, and then how you can really make yourself stand out as a stellar candidate by asking some really good questions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive in, and we're going to talk about, how do you prepare? So the very first thing that you want to do whenever you get that notification that they would like to interview you, you're going to have this like, yay, I got the interview. And then you may even have that follow-up of like, oh, I got the interview, right? So you may just like get a little bit nervous about that, but it's like everything else, right? You just get yourself as prepared as you can possibly get. You think about all the things that could happen during that interview process, and you plan and you prepare for that. For me personally, whenever I am very prepared, it helps bring my anxiety down. So I'm one of those, like, I will over prepare so that I feel comfortable in that situation. Now, it's impossible to prepare for absolutely everything, but the more prepared you are, the better. And it will show that you were prepared. So the first thing that I always recommend whenever you do get called for a job interview and you sit down to do that preparation is that you go back and you review the job description. Because as you'll see a little bit later in the training, that the interviewer usually uses that job description to create questions to kind of drill into what your skill sets are. So they're going to use that job description as a starting place to ask you some really good targeted interview questions. So always go back and review that. And just a tip, whenever you do apply for a job, I highly recommend that you save a copy of that job posting, because sometimes whenever they close that job posting, or they're actually doing the interviews, they'll close the job posting and then you can't go back and review it. So save a copy of it, put it somewhere where you can find it, maybe even attach it with your resume somewhere in a folder, because you should be creating a tailored resume for every single job posting. So it would make sense to keep the job posting and that resume together. And then what I would recommend that you do with this, besides just reviewing it, I would recommend that for every bullet point where it says, you know, you need to have X, you need to be able to do this, you need to be able to do curriculum mapping, whatever that is, have an example or have a statement prepared that you have practiced a few times, so that if they ask you a question about it, you'll have a good answer. You don't want to sound robotic or scripted or anything like that, but you don't want to be caught off guard either. So this is just a way for you to get yourself really prepared. All right, so preparing for that interview. All right, I didn't realize that I had animated those, so sorry. So whenever you're looking at the job description, what I do as an interviewer, I usually categorize things into buckets. And Katie's going to show you that in a little bit. Whenever she shows you some interview questions, they're grouped into buckets. So these are some buckets that you might encounter whenever you're going through your interview. So there's probably like some getting to know you questions, like they want to fill you out as a human being, you know, to see kind of what you're all about. They're going to want to ask some questions to assess your knowledge and your skills. They may even ask you some questions like, how do you build relationships when you first come into a job, right? So these are things that you're going to think about. What kind of team player are you? How do you participate in a team environment? So they might ask you some targeted questions around that. They may even ask you about the company values. So you should always do some research about the company, check out their websites. What's their mission statement? What are their values? Do they support any organizations, right? So check all that out so that you can reference back to it with some of your answers during that process. Project management is a huge one for L&D professionals. You may not realize it, but as a L&D professional, you are wearing a project management hat. Whenever we build training solutions or learning solutions, there are hundreds of tasks that go with that. So you have to be a really good project manager of those tasks. So they may ask you some questions related to project management. And then problem solving. They may ask you some scenarios to see how you might respond to those, or they might ask you how you solve a problem, or they might ask you about some past problems, things like that. So these are just categories that your interviewers often use to help create some questions or some buckets of questions to really dig in and get to know you as a potential candidate. All right. And then another thing that you can do to prepare is a little internet stalking. So I often ask during that interview process, you know, hey, who's going to be in the interview? And they might say, well, you know, the director of learning solutions, or the vice president of L&D, or the head of our training department. And then I might go out to LinkedIn or even Google, and I might search those job titles for that company to see if I can figure out who's going to be in that interview. And then I just do a little bit of research about them. And I'll probably, most of the time, I would even type that up so that I can review it. And then during that interview process, when the opportunity presents, then I might say, oh, and Katie, I saw on your LinkedIn that you have experience, you know, working with children as a volunteer. So you can create some personal connection, but also you're demonstrating like you're really interested in this job because you've done a lot of research about the company and about the individuals in the room. So you just want to make sure that you're always checking to see who's going to be in that interview and find out as much information as you can. Now, it's not always possible to find out who the players are, who the people in the room are going to be. Just do your best, right? And then just overcompensate with the website and just getting to know the organization and what's important to them. Now I'm going to pass this over to Katie, who's going to take you through what to expect.
Yes. So there might be a lot of things that you can expect since there's so many different organizations, and especially in this field, there could be such a variety of what could be included or what the different jobs are, but these are just some general expectations about how to approach the interview and what you can best guess will be introduced into that interview process. So the first thing is really at the start of that interview, be ready for some, hey, tell us about yourself sort of things. Hey, tell us about what kind of things that you like. So especially in today's time, we might be ready for a virtual interview process from start to finish, especially if you're looking for a remote position. The remote lifestyle is going to be in that interview as well, which means that there's going to be maybe some times at the beginning that you're going to have to wait for everybody to jump on to the Zoom meeting, or to kind of be ready for that kind of transition for everyone to join in, because you may or may not be in the room with everyone to be able to have that important connection. And it will be tough sometimes to build a connection throughout the little small talk in the beginning and throughout, because you're staring at a computer screen. We build connection through eye contact and through being around someone's body language. And in the interview process, it might be tough to be able to do that. So anything you can do that would build that connection and be ready for small talk in the first part of it or throughout is going to really be a great way for you to start that interview off right. Be ready for them to introduce the other people in the room, for the other people, the team that would be interviewing you. Be ready for those kind of like, this is our blah, 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 blah. And down the line, if you can kind of say, oh, thank you, Shawntay. That's really great. The more you're going to be able to remember who is important in your interview at the time. So kind of try to say, thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you, Katie. And then move on to the other introductions in the room. But also be ready for some questions, or maybe just some for you to ask about the company, about kind of what they do, and about the position. This is going to be important as you will see that on paper. Just like Shawntay said, the job description on paper, and you can prep for that. Your interviewer might say the things that are the most important right up front. So you would know as an interviewee, like, okay, these are the things that I really need to pay attention to, because they're saying these are the most important pieces of that job description that I need to kind of be asking about or listening for, because those are the things they're usually going to say first. This position, we're looking for someone that is ... And so listening for their description of the position is also an important thing for you as an interviewee. The next part is having a something ready, your elevator pitch, your thing about yourself that you can tell at the beginning, because it's probably going to be their very, very first question, which is, tell us about you. And if you can't have just a couple of sentences, and that always gets me, because I'm ready for the interview. I'm ready for the questions about the position. And sometimes this question can throw me off because I'm not quite ready for the tell me about yourself sort of thing. So if you're ready with just a little elevator pitch, that's coming in the beginning, is tell us a little bit about you, Katie. What's going on? Or what kind of brought you here today in terms of your background? You also might hear, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? So if there is something that you can take, we have an Enneagram sort of test that I have taken at a previous organization. If you can take something that tells a little bit about yourself, that you can also say, sometimes I'm this, or I can be this, but it's also a strength. The old adage of turn a negative into a positive. Your strengths and weaknesses work the same way. So I'll give you an example. So one of my Enneagram numbers is a 3, which means that I am super focused on success and I want to win. So that's a big strength of mine, is that I want to win and I want to do well. And it really is important to me. And sometimes that makes me a little overly competitive when it comes to certain things. So I've learned over time that I use that as an outlet. I use running and other outlets to be able to get that overly competitive nature. And so I don't bring it to the workplace. That's a way to kind of know that about yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses, having something ready for that question is going to be a great positive for you to be ready for. And then the next sort of questions that you can probably expect to find, which is, tell us about a difficult situation that you've had at work in the past and maybe how you've handled it. Work that into your strength. So if you've just answered a question about your strength and what you do, it was hard for me to work through the situation because I got a little competitive, but I was able to deal with it in this way. And this is how I was able to work through that. And I do that now in every situation where I encounter that same sort of situation. It's a great way to do that. And then number 4, why are you leaving your current role? That will probably no doubt come up, is that, why are you leaving? Why are you looking for a job? What kind of things are you looking for? It's going to be great for you to not spin it, but be able to say, I'm leaving because I'm searching for growth, or I'm searching for something positive and good, and not dog your current or former workplace. Look for something that's going to be positive and bring that. That's going to be a great question to bring. And then the other questions that could come up is an expectation is, what makes you the best candidate for this position? How are you going to push yourself and be able to set yourself apart from in your connection, and also to sell it to them that you are the best candidate for this position? Why do you want to work for us? Why do you want to work for this company? What's something that you could say to be able to have ready to answer this question? And then the great part of the end of the interview process is usually, do you have any questions? What questions do you have for us? Having something ready based on your experience, based on what you're looking for in a job, having 2 or 3 questions is always a great thing to have in your arsenal, and all of these questions as an expectation. What kind of questions can you ask them that would tell you about the company, about your potential experience that you would have there, and also about what your expectations would be as the person that works there? What could they tell you that would say, yes, this definitely is the right place and the right role for me that I could really take on from there? So there's some great expectations. And like I said at the beginning, Shawntay and I met in an interview, and I immediately was so intimidated by her, but all just immediately wanted her approval so fast. So she's graciously shared her list of interview questions, and it's bringing back some great memories for me, because this was a lot of the experience that we had in our interview, and she hasn't regretted it as much yet, I don't think. Maybe not. So this would be a great insight for you to see how someone in the L&D space might answer or ask these specific questions. They might group them into things around project management, around how you take a training process from start to finish. How do you build or keep relationships, and what kind of leadership that you might be able to have, prefer, or what you would ideally want, or describe your most ideal leadership. So this would be kind of how she would break this down. She would tell a little bit about the company, about the position. So listening to how she would describe the top things that really come out of the most important parts of the position and what they're really looking for. And in red, if you'll notice, why are you leaving your current job? What are some things that you could tell me about your reasons for leaving that I know I would be listening for to make sure that you're a right fit for this role? So they might answer and ask a lot of these types of questions. You might see a lot of differences in terms of the organization and the company and the position, but you also might hear a lot of these mixes, and they're listening for whether or not you can say the things that they also want to hear that's important for the position, but that you're a right fit for the role and for the organization. So having questions like this ready to go or ready to ask is a great part of that. So Shawntay, what's your favorite question on this list to ask?
Well, I think it really depends. A lot of times I'll create a structure. I'm interviewing for an instructional design job for one of my clients right now. So I typically have the questions that I think that I want to ask, and there are some key questions that I'll ask across all candidates. But sometimes I will have questions on the fly related to a response that the interviewee had given. And, I just kind of want to dig more into that. I do like a version of the strengths and weaknesses question. Anybody who's like, weaknesses? I don't think I have any. Like, that's a telltale sign, right?
Yeah.
None of us are perfect. So we definitely all have our weaknesses. That's a good one. Even as simple as, what questions do you have for me? And we're going to talk about that. But that's a really big one for me, because if somebody is like, no, I'm good, I think you covered them all. Well, as an instructional designer, I need to know that you can ask probing questions, that you can lean into a situation. And if you don't have any questions for me, that kind of sends the wrong message sometimes. Now, not always, because sometimes I can tell, like, when somebody's extremely nervous. And usually as an interviewer, we're very forgiving of people that are nervous. That's just to be expected. Even seasoned professionals get nervous during an interview. So you kind of just like have to weigh it all, the whole situation. But I do look for questions. I want to know that you've checked out the website, that you really know this role, that you're really invested and interested. So I'll ask questions like that. And then I have a natural love for project management. And so I'll ask questions about that to understand your process. I want to know somebody's process from start to finish. So I'm like, okay, so a training request comes in. Now what? Walk me through it. And then I'll ask some different probing questions along the way. So it really just does vary. In this particular instance, these questions that you're seeing on the screen earlier, whenever we were showing you the job description, these questions were built for that job description. And that job description was Katie's job description whenever she first made her transition into, or her first job with me. This is Katie's second job with me, by the way. So she came back twice. I'm not too scared.
Yeah, exactly. Interviews is where it happens, y'all. It's where it happens. But I would also ask you to think about the type of position, because not all roles are perfect for you, whether you're in an interview or not. But the questions that you ask, which Shawntay will really get into, are so important around what you would want to get out of that place, about that working environment. How would you say that goals are passed down in this organization? What are my expectations when it comes, like, all those things are so important, even though, yes, I want that job, I need that job, whatever the expectation for you is. We also want to make sure that that role is right and it's not going to suck the life out of you for the rest of your life. So we want to make sure that it's right. And those questions become so, so important. I did see a comment over here that tell us about yourself is not an aria on your life story. It is a quick elevator pitch, like they said, 30-second commercial. That's a great way to put it. Be ready to give a brief overview so that they can kind of get a sense, and also for it to connect with you. That's a great tip to be able to do that. And then Shawntay, as far as going to prepare for that interview, what other things can we do to prepare for those questions at the end?
So this is really about preparing the questions for your interview. So like everything that we're talking about right now is, about like, come with your own questions. So now we're going to walk through some potential questions that you might show up with, right? And the good thing is that you can use these questions to position yourself how you're even a better fit for this organization. So this one right now, like, what is the biggest challenge of this position? As they're talking about it, how can I help you with your biggest problem or the biggest challenge of the organization? And as they're explaining this, you can ask some clarifying questions. You can give some examples of what you've done before, if you have some of those. How do I compare to other candidates? Look, this one could be a really hard question to hear, to ask, because they'll give you their candid feedback usually about how you compare. But I like to ask this one because it helps me know how did I do in this interview, and how am I currently rating against other people who have gone through that interview process. Maybe asking the person that you would potentially report to, what is your leadership style like? Tell me about that. Tell me how you like to work with your team, because this also goes back to what Katie said. This is about exploring not just the job, but how you might feel in that job, right? You know, there are people that are command and control leadership style. There are people that are collaborative. So it's really important that you find an organization that has a style that you're going to enjoy, because it's not just about a paycheck. It's not just about getting that first job. It's about actually having joy in that job. So you want to ask some questions in a really, in a really easygoing way to like really uncover the truth without being like, hey, so are you a dictator? You know, so, but you definitely want to ask right? I've worked for one of those before, so I don't recommend that. You might ask, what are the other roles on the team? So you get a sense of what the team structure is like. You know, is this a team where the instructional designer just does instructional design, and then there's an e-learning developer, a graphic designer, a video specialist, or is it a team that has 2 people and they do everything, right? So you just want to ask about that structure so that you understand, again, what you're coming into and make sure that it's a good fit for you. And then I do love this question, you know, like, where can I provide the most value right away? Because now you're connecting yourself to that job. You're connecting yourself to how you're going to provide value to the team, to the company, and you're going to do it right away. So they can tell you what that's like. And again, as they're explaining it, you can ask some clarifying questions. You can give some examples of how you've done this before to really reinforce how you could provide that value. And then you can ask, what would be my first project, right? So you could get a little bit of a sense about what you're going to do first. And again, give some examples and reinforce, again, why you're a good fit, because you've done something similar, maybe in a different organization. And then you might ask, like, how do you describe the culture here? This is a really important one. You know, not all cultures are great. Some are fantastic. Some aren't. A lot of times you can tell whenever you walk into a company. I used to work at Mary Kay Corporate in just outside in the Dallas area. I was on the L&D, or I was in a project manager education role for L&D for the Europe team. And let me tell you, the very first day that I was even in the interview, I come in, they're like, hi, how are you doing? Everybody's smiling. Everybody looks happy. And then on my first day, like, they had decked out my entire cubicle. They had balloons, they had streamers, like they were so excited to see me. And then as I was getting introduced to different people in the organizations, VPs, everybody, and they're like, welcome to the last job that you will ever have, because it was just such a phenomenal culture. I have always said that if I ever had to go back to a brick and mortar building to work, that's what I would do, because they are just phenomenal. Their culture, it's unbeatable. It's one of the best cultures that I've ever had the privilege of working in. This is not a Mary Kay commercial, by the way. Just talking about culture and how important that is. All right. And then just this last piece as we're wrapping up, but you want to make sure that you get yourself ready for the interview. And there's a lot to do about getting ready for the interview. Personally, I like to have a really nice, fancy resume for an in-person interview so that I can like hand it. You know, it's a presentation. It's not like, you know, it's almost like you go out to dinner and, you know, there's at home, you know, like we might use some paper plates at home, right? But if I were having a dinner party, I might not break out the paper plates. I might break out the flowered, you know, plates, like create a whole theme and an experience. Well, the same is true for an interview. You want to create that experience. You want to be memorable. You want your resume to stand out. So I might set that up in like a really nice folder or something and hand one to each person. So that's one thing that you could do to get ready for in-person. Now, if it's virtual, you need to think about the environment around you. One time I was doing a live stream in a previous role and I had a guest presenter come on, and this is live, and he has the whiteboard behind him and it has sex real big on the whiteboard, and we're streaming this to thousands of people. Now, after that event, obviously I had like a list of things for people like check off and look, but you need to be thinking about what's in your background space too, right? Is there a baby? Is there a dog? For example, I have 2 dogs here right now because I'm babysitting a dog and have my own dog. So they are currently hanging out in my bedroom so that their barks whenever the doorbell rings or a car that drives by does not interfere with this. So you just need to be thinking about some of those things, your environment, what people are going to hear, what people are going to see, make your space really nice. Your hair, your makeup, if you wear makeup, your clothes, like all of that, you just want to put together like a really good first impression because they count. If you're going for a creative job, maybe you want to have something fun on your shirt, some pink flamingos or something. I don't know, whatever that shouts, I'm a creative. And yeah, just make sure that you have all your materials ready. Now, if you're doing something virtual, you can even have some sticky notes up on your screen in different areas that kind of cue you and help you remember some different things. So that's really nice. Katie, anything else that you would add to that as far as preparation and getting yourself ready?
Yep. Bring your confidence. Like I would, if there's a shirt, if I'm facilitating going to an interview, I know that there are shirts that I feel the best in. I feel confident. Knowing what your boosters are really important to be able to bring the right kind of confidence and kind of help with the anxiety of meeting new people and talking to them, whether it's face-to-face or virtually. Like all of that is just important. Whatever boosts your confidence, bring that too.
That's a really good point. One strategy that I have used in the past, whenever I get really nervous, my neck gets really red, my ears get red, my cheeks get flushed, or when I'm mad, or I've had too much caffeine or too much sugar. So going into an interview, I always know that I'm going to be nervous or into a new situation. So I don't wear like a revealing shirt that's going to show you how red my neck is. I keep my hair down so you can't see how red my ears are because they're going to get beet red. So just paying attention to some of those things, because I don't know how you are, but when I know that other people can tell that I'm nervous because I look nervous, it makes me more nervous. Oh, yeah. So it's really just about controlling the anxiety and giving that professional appearance that I want to give.